What's going on, everybody? My name is Monatui, coach of the Tampa Bay Luxrays, and today I'm bringing you guys our GBA Season 6 Week 5 Team Builder versus none other than George, aka Septile MC of the San Francisco Arcaniners. Please check out his channel in the description below if you have not already. He is an absolutely incredible battler. He is doing extremely well this season, and he is the only person ahead of us in our division. So we are really looking for a win here, though. It is not going to be easy at all. George excels in this type of format. He was the runner-up last season. He did very well in the D-League when they did it a very long time ago. Not too long ago, but when they did it a while ago, he did very well there. He is just an incredible battler. He won the March Madness tournament and won like $30 over Shoddy, which is fun to see. Not just his incredible team prep, but also watching Shoddy get shat on. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into the roster that George drafted. Should be popping up on screen now. George has the Latias, Melodic, Infernape, Forretress, Snorlax, Gardevoir, Spiritomb, Magneton, Megabeedrill, Simisage, and Nidoqueen, which he franchised from last season. So he has a very scary lineup there. Megabeedrill, he is made to be a threat. Nobody liked Megabeedrill before this, really. I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't love it now. It's kind of situational, but in the situation versus my team, I could definitely see it coming. And he also built around Megabeedrill very, very well, drafting something like Magneton, which can trap steel types like Skarmory and Ferrothorn that don't want to, or that can deal with Megabeedrill. He's just built his team very, very well. He's got a very dangerous Fire Water core, and then Simisage down there, which can also kind of be a threat to my team as well. I do have two water types. And then Nidoqueen, which is just an issue. Everything in his team is an issue. Everything on his team is an issue. Like, there's nothing here that I see that I think there's no chance of him bringing. Like, the thing that I think is least likely for him to bring would probably be the Megabeedrill, because I do have Garchomp that can just switch in on any U-turn, get Rough Skin Rocky Helmet damage off on it, even though I'm not bringing a Tank Chomp, spoilers. But his team is constructed very well and does have, I feel, a pretty good matchup versus my team. And without further ado, let's just get into the team of 6 that I am bringing to face off George. This is going to be definitely tough, but this team that I built, I think, is going to be good enough to take on whatever he can do to me. So, starting off, we have our mixed defensive Mandibuzz. Similar spread that we had last week, a little bit less SPDF, a little bit more physical defense. That is because Latias is a little bit weaker than Latios. This amount of SPDF allows me to take 2 Life Orb Draco Meteors from a Latias. Not entirely sure if he'd bring Life Orb, but just in case, this is what we have. The rest in physical defense, that helps me take on things like the Infernape a little bit better. It allows me to not get 2 KO'd by the Megabeedrill, which is very nice. I can take on the Snorlax a little bit better, and possibly Toxic that if he is not running immunity, if he is Thick Fat instead. And I can take on any form of Simisage. I can take on any form of Nidoqueen, except it being like modest Life Orb, which I'm not entirely sure if he would bring. Definitely possible. Like, that's probably the most common type of Nidoqueen, though George definitely loves bringing his berries. I can see him bringing like a Pasho Berry for a Azumarill or a Shuka Berry for my Garchomp, so I have to be very careful of that. And the move coverage that we have on it, Foul Play, just hits the majority of his team relatively hard. He has a lot of physical attackers. Well, not a lot of physical attackers, but Foul Play is very good. Oko's the Beedrill. Does some good damage to Nidoqueen. Can do some decent damage to Infernape despite being resisted. Can 2 KO the Latias, assuming it's not running a lot of defense investment. So that's definitely nice there. Toxic just to wear whatever I can down. If he switches into Gardevoir, trying to get a good offensive switch into my Mandibuzz, I want that thing poisoned. If he switches in Snorlax trying to set up on me, I want that poisoned. Hopefully he's not immunity, but we'll deal with that when we get there. If he switches in his Spiritomb onto me, trying to burn me or do whatever to me, I want to Toxic that thing. So you get the point there. Toxic is very nice because he doesn't have a ton of Cleric support. He's got his Gardevoir as his only Cleric. I would like to status something and hopefully have that status stay so that I can wear something on his team down for my other offensive mons. Defog. Haven't brought Defog yet, but against George, I feel like it is almost 100% necessary. For one, George is going to know that I typically don't bring hazard removal. I like to pressure my opponents offensively, hazard stack them myself, so I don't typically bother with Defog. But against someone like George, who loves Toxic Spikes, I think this is necessary. Because Toxic Spikes are a big hindrance to my team. They hit everything other than the Bronzong, and even though I do have an Amoonguss, he has ways to pressure that, so he may see that and just want to build a team around taking out Azumarill, or taking out Amoonguss, so that he can set up his Toxic Spikes for free, or make it so that he has Toxic Spikes up, I'm forced to go into Amoonguss at some point, and then he makes a good switch into something like Infernape or Gardevoir that immediately threatens my Amoonguss. So, he could definitely do that, and I definitely see him bringing Toxic Spikes because, like I said, he loves bringing Toxic Spikes. He's even used it on Mega Beedrill once. Crazy, but it worked. So, that is why we have Defog, and then Roost, just to heal myself up. I want this thing healthy to take on the Lottie, the Infernape, things like I said earlier. And the EV spread I already went over, so we are definitely done with that. And then leftovers. Didn't need a berry. This thing's bulky enough to take some super effective hits anyway, so leftovers just to get myself some passive recovery going. Now, moving on to the next mon on our team, definitely going a little bit more offensive, and by a little bit, I mean a ton more offensive. And we got our Life Orb Emboar. Enough speed to outspeed Melodic by multiple points, many points, just in case he decides to bring kind of a speedy Melodic. He saw how speedy Jellicent kind of worked for his team. He may want to do the same to me, seeing that it might work against me. I also, with this, am able to outspeed Magneton by a lot, so he's got to kind of be careful with the speed creeping on Magneton. I outspeed an uninvested Nidoqueen by a lot. I outspeed an uninvested Gardevoir. If he decides to bring that, don't think he will, but it's possible. This Emboar is a very big threat to his team. He has a couple different switch-ins to this. He could bring like a defensive Latias, which I do have Sucker Punch for. Can get some good damage off on that. Could bring a defensive Melodic, which I 2 KO with a Wild Charge, and he could possibly bring, like, I don't know, maybe like a thick fat Snorlax, though that wouldn't be a switch into this because I have Stab for it, even though he may be Chople. There's a lot of, I'm going kind of off topic here, but there are a lot of particular things that I have to be careful with George, whether it be a berry or an EV spread. It's just, George is very particular, and George always builds each individual mon with a purpose, and this is going to be no different. So I have to try and get into his head, figure out what purpose each mon has, and play accordingly. But anyway, back to Emboar. Like I said, this thing just 2 KOs his entire team, as Emboar typically does. Flare Blitz will be able to 2 KO Latias, bar it being like a defensive Latias, and like I said, I do have Sucker Punch to pick it off if it tries to attack me. Melodic 2 KO'd by Wild Charge should be outsped. Infernape was 2 KO'd by Flare Blitz and Wild Charge and Low Kick and everything except Sucker Punch. Fortress is a big thing that Emboar should be able to capitalize on. Like every time Fortress is in, I can switch out into Emboar. Even if he gets up Rocks or a layer of Spikes or a layer of T-Spikes, I am then threatening everything on his team immediately, which is very nice. Like I said, I outspeed the Snorlax, should be able to knock that out with Low Kick because it's very heavy, unless he is Chople, which I do have to watch out for. He does have the Gardevoir that can outspeed me, but Sucker Punch does do a very nice chunk to that, and he cannot switch it in, or else it will go down to the Flare Blitz. Spiritomb will be easily 2 KO'd, possibly even one-shotted if he's fully Spadef for whatever reason. Magneton goes down. Mega Beedrill has a chance to die to Sucker Punch, so we don't even need to go into the Flare Blitz calcs on that. Simisage, of course, dies to Flare Blitz, and then the Nidoqueen, which should be 2 KO'd. So, so this is a very good mon for his team because it just breaks apart his walls. It weakens important things that I need to weaken, like the Latias and Melodic. It is just a very crucial part of this team because if I can get enough damage on certain things, my win conditions later on that I'll get into will be able to clean up. So with that being said, that is Emboar. Let us now move on to a mon that I have not brought yet this season. We have our Lanturn. Sugarberry Lanturn, that is so I can take a Earthquake or an Earth Power from the Nidoqueen and hit that super effectively with the Scald. Can take a Drill Run from the Mega Beedrill, though I'm sure he'd rather just go for Poison Jab because it does the exact same amount and cannot miss. Same amount because of adaptability. This is also a great switch into the Magneton, shuts that down entirely, unless he is running HP Grass, and even then it's not a 2 KO, and if he's running HP Grass instead of Ice, he cannot really touch my Garchomp. So there is that. We have Ice Beam for the Latias. That's not going to do a ton of damage, but it will be able to at least do enough to it to the point where he's possibly forced to roost and I can maybe get a free switch out into my Bronzong or my Azumarill or something like that. Just nice thing to hit that. Debated T-Wave, but decided it wasn't worth it since he does have some electric immunities. He could honestly switch in Melodic on this thing because Volt Switch is going to do piss poor damage because Lanturn is very weak, Melodic's very bulky, and if he switches that in on a Lanturn, or he stays in trying to Mirror Coat me for whatever reason and I Thunder Wave it, then I'm just giving it Marvel Scale. So there is that. And then as you can see there at the bottom, we have Heal Bell. Now that is for not only just to remove statuses that are inflicted onto my team from his mons, but also we are bringing a Perish Trap Azumarill with Rest, so it would be very nice to wake my Azumarill up if I possibly can. And yeah, this is a Perish Trap Azumarill. Cannot run Perish Trap with Sap Sipper, unfortunately. Could run Huge Power, I think, but there's no point because my only attacking move is Whirlpool. So with this Azumarill, I will be able to, the biggest job that this thing has is to trap the Melodic. Trap and knock out the Melodic. Granted, I can 2 a KO with Banded Play Rough, but then he has a free switch into Fortress afterwards where he can set up Hazards, Volt Switch, etc. Banded Superpower can 2 a KO the Snorlax, possibly even OHKO it. But then he has a free switch into something like Spiritomb where he can go out into Mega Beedrill afterwards and Revenge Kill me. And I don't have the best switch-ins to Mega Beedrill because I'm not bringing a Tank Chomp, as we'll get into in a bit. So this is just this mon. The biggest job that this thing has is to trap the Melodic, like I said. Another big job would be to trap the Snorlax, because this Perish trapping Azumarill really fits well with my Garchomp that I'll get into in a little bit. It deals with the threats that my Garchomp has to deal with, or that my Garchomp does not want to deal with. So like I said, just standard Perish Trap, leftovers, and then EV Spread, physically defensive with a careful nature just to take on his team the best that I can. He has some good mixed attackers on his team like Infernape, Latias. I'll be able to take 2 hits from anything. I'll be able to take 2 hits from the Latias, bar like an offensive Thunderbolt. Not 2 KO'd by anything from Infernape, bar Thunder Punch or Gunk Shot, which is very nice. I can deal with the Gardevoir relatively well. So the EV Spread just kind of made to take on as much as it can. But like I said, biggest job for this thing is trap the Melodic and trap the Snorlax. And then my Garchomp will be good to go. So next up on our team, we have a very standard set in Bronzong. Especially defensive, leftovers, Gyro Ball, EQ, Toxic, Stealth Rock. Nothing really to go over here. It's relatively standard, but this is also my best switch into the Gardevoir, which is a very big problem to my team. I wish this thing got recovered so I could continuously deal with Gardevoir, but there's nothing I can really do about that. So if he's like got Shadow Ball, that'll be wearing me down. If he burns me with Will-O-Wisp, that'll be unfortunate. This also can Toxic the Melodic, can deal with the Latias very well, can kind of deal with the Mega Beedrill. I don't want to be taking U-turns continuously, but I can take 2, and then, you know, if he stays in for whatever reason, I can knock it out with the Gyro Ball. I have EQ for the Nidoqueen as well. That is a possible 2 KO. Probably not going to be a 2 KO, but definitely a 3 KO, which is very nice. Get good damage on that, put it in range of stuff. Deals with the Simisage, bar being like SD with knockoff, and I'm kind of not expecting Simisage, not because it's like terrible versus my team, but I feel like he's got other threats he's going to want to bring. But Simisage is definitely a possibility. If George finds an excuse to bring Simisage, I'm sure he will be happy to do so. So I can't count that out fully. This also, unless he is a Magnet-Rise Magneton, which would not be the craziest thing I have ever seen from George. He did bring in against John for Drill Run Escavalier. Then he will be able to trap my Bronzong and beat me 1v1. But if he does not have Magnet Rise, then I will be able to eliminate him with the Bronzong's Earthquake, which is very nice. And yeah, that is Bronzong. Just standard Split F is very good versus his team. And like I said, I kind of need it for that Gardevoir because offensive Gardevoir's Moonblast is a big issue to me. So with Bronzong out of the way, let us now move into the biggest win condition versus George's team. If you saw the match that went up versus MV, you'll see that a Rock Polished On fan was able to sweep him once Melodic was weakened. And this is relatively similar, but because Garchomp of course does not have its own way to boost its speed, we are running a Stalic Berry, Sub-Stalic Garchomp, Earthquake, Dragon Claw, SD, and Sub. I don't even necessarily need SD, but there will possibly be a situation in which it'll come in handy, and I want it to be there. And I don't really need too much other coverage for his team. I could run Fire Fang or Fire Blast for the Fortress, but Fortress is hopefully going to be setup fodder anyway, and I'm not going to need it. So like I said, Sub-Stalic, Earthquake, Dragon Claw, SD, Sub, hits the entirety of his team super effectively or neutrally, can 2 KO almost everything. The only things I don't 2 KO are Defensive Snorlax and Fortress. Let's just go through his team real quick. I knock out Latias with Dragon Claw. Also Melodic. I don't 2 KO Melodic. But after Rocks, I do have a very good chance to. So I can possibly 2 KO the Melodic after Rocks. I knock out the Latias, like I said. I knock out the Infernape. I knock out the Gardevoir after Rocks guaranteed, and I have a possibility to knock it out before Rocks. I can possibly 2 KO the Spiritomb. Can knock out the Magneton, I knock out the Mega Beedrill, I can almost knock out the Simisage, and I knock out the Nidoqueen. So, after a Stalic boost, I outspeed all of these things, bar Scarfers, and even then, the only thing Scarfed he can use to outspeed me are his Infernape and Latias. So, this is just a huge threat to his team. His team is relatively ground weak, and the only immunity he has to ground, I hit super effectively with my other stabs. So this is my biggest win condition versus his team. It's just, I don't even need an SD necessarily. Like, if his team is weakened enough, I can just keep clicking Substitute until my Stalic Berry activates so I can outspeed the rest of his team and OHKO everything. So, update required. Really, this is the best time for this. But anyway, this Garchomp is a huge threat, and I need to preserve this for the right time, but I should be able to get that time. Something like a Fortress without Explosion is complete setup fodder. Like, if he has Gyro Ball, it will not be able to break my sub until my Stalic Berry boosts my speed. Something like Infernape, he may not want to switch into. Or he may be forced out, because if I'm Scarfed, I knock it out. Also, if he's like locked into Flare Blitz or something like that, I can set up versus that. Snorlax, if it does not have Ice Punch, I can possibly set up versus that, though I don't want to get Body Slam parried, of course. Spiritomb, if it does have Infiltrator, which it probably will, I can't really set up versus, but otherwise, if it's like pressure for whatever reason, I will be able to. Mega Beedrill is something I will more than likely be able to set up versus, because if I'm Scarfed, I can knock it out in one hit with an EQ, and if I'm not Scarfed, he may not want to even click U-turn versus me, because he's going to be taking Rough Skin and possibly Rocky Helmet damage. At least, that's what he would think in his mind. So, I think I've talked about this Garchomp enough. I'm sure you guys can see how big of a threat it is to George's team, and I'm going to attempt to pull off a similar sweep that MV did. So, yeah, I'm hoping that works out, and thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. The match will be going up on Sunday, as always, and like I said, definitely check out George's channel. He is an absolutely incredible battler. I have been watching his matches ever since the very first D-League, and he continues to impress me every single match. So, thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you next time.